Well, welcome everybody to the 2023 Open Budget Workshop. We appreciate you coming in person as well as those online. However, those in person, please help yourself to some pie and our pie chart cake, which we think is very fun. Who says budget workshops cannot be fun, right? So we're glad to have everybody here. My name is Cindy Spillane, and I'm the Executive Director for the Daybreak Community Association. Here with me are several members of our Budget and Finance Committee. We have Ron Tucker, Cindy Costa, and Zakia Richardson. So they were an integral part of working on this budget. We were all joking earlier that we spent a couple of months putting this all together, and it'll take us about 15 minutes to go through it with you guys. So you get the easy part. If everyone would please hold their questions until the end. That way we can get through all of the information. Those of you that are online, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen when you have questions. And again, at the end, we will read those off. And any that we don't get to, we have a Q&A form that is already on the site, on the website. We will update it with any questions that we get here tonight as well. So handouts that you have are the various departmental budgets. For those of you online, those were posted on the website early this morning, so they are available for you as well. So what we're going to do today, if I try not to hit myself in the head with this microphone, we're going to just go through some of our budget highlights, some of the budgeting processes, and all the fun times that we had as a group going through all of this. So again, we want to welcome you and thank you all for coming out and spending tonight with us. So what are the things that we wanted to go through and why you have so many pieces of paper as your handout is we went through a software upgrade. And so in our new software, which is called VMS, every area has its own departmental code, its own department number. So each department has its own financial statement. So what you have in there are our operating department, which is the main function of the community association budget. Then we have Ochre Lake, the splash pool, all of the pools with their own department numbers. And then we have our community center and then the water course amenity. And the numbers beside there are the internal department numbers. So that helps us track everything. And it also helps us to keep things itemized. And it hopefully makes it simpler for our homeowners to track and see where the money is going and to keep that transparency as easy and simple as possible. One of the things that I wanted to mention is with this group of budgets that you have, they all work together, even though they're individually itemized on there in their own departments, they roll up to net zero. So each individual department does not net zero at the bottom, but when you put it all together, they net zero and we have a balanced budget. Our service areas all have their own departments, and so we are here to talk about the master budget, not the service area or sub-association budgets. Our service areas, we currently have 12, and those are for those of you who might live in some of our townhome associations. You will also get a copy of your personal budget along with the master budget in the mailing that goes out. As of now, I believe there's only one that might have an increase. And for that specific service area, we will have a special town hall with just that group of folks to go over their budget with them so that they will understand what is in that. So when you look at our financials, they're broken up into categories. You know, typical financial statements for those of you who are used to looking at them. We have our income or revenue section, and then in the expenses, you have your administrative department, contract services, insurance, and the rest of them that are itemized in here. So each one of the budgets that you have will have these various categories, except you will notice, especially in the pools, they don't have an income section. Pools don't make their own revenue. All of that, again, is up in the Department 1 revenue income section. So everybody's here wanting to know how much is the assessment being proposed to increase for 2023. As of now, the increase proposed is $3 per month. So your base assessment will go from $98.50 to $101.50. There was not a change in the CenturyLink revenue share, so that stayed at the $33 a month. and it will be billed quarterly as normal at $403.50 per quarter. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk about a few of the highlights that helped contribute to that $3 per month increase as we move forward. One of the things that you're wanting to pay attention is, as we go through this draft process, as I said, we've been working on this for a couple of months now. My original first draft that came out was an actual $8 increase. So going through it, working with the Budget and Finance Committee, the Board of Directors, we really whittled it down and got it to a really tight, strong budget with the $3 proposed increase. So as we go through here, one of the things that we wanted to talk about, obviously, is our historical trends and the economy. Everyone has been impacted by our inflation economical stance that we're in. Daybreak is no different. So we're paying higher prices for goods and services just like everybody else is. But what you want to look at when you see these two charts on the screen is it starts from 2007 when the first assessments were charged all the way through to 2023. So it shows you that over the past 16 years, we have had an average of 3.49% annual increase if you average it out over the 16 years. This year is at a 2.28% increase. And as you go through, you might want to compare and look at the bottom graph, which is talking about the sales and closings. You can see in the year 2020, we had 1,051. And you'll notice in 2021 and 2022 on the upper, we didn't have an increase. And although the inflationary rate for those 2 years was higher than the normal 3% we're used to, we were able to absorb that as a community without an increase in those 2 years because of that significantly high unbudgeted number of sales. So now we're evening back out, going back towards, if I might say, a little bit of a more normal annual year, although next year is going to be a little lower than we've had before. And again, that's based on our actual projections of what our new sales are going to be with all of our developers and builders we gotten together. And we're expecting to have 225 new sales, 225 new units adding in to the group. So it's kind of interesting how it all plays together year over year. And hopefully you can look at this slide and you can see how you're adding in your units do help make a difference and offset the expenses to help keep those assessments as low as possible. So some of our income highlights. Now, again, when you're looking at the handouts, or if you're looking at what we put online as the same handouts, there are quite a number of individual line items. Every single line item is impacted in part of that $3 proposed increase. But what we want to do is we wanted to pull out a few of the main features, those that we think had the biggest impact and those that most usually our residents have asked about. And so we're trying to pull those out. But again, at the end, at the Q&A, if you have a different line item that we don't exactly pull out here, please feel free to ask about it during the Q&A and we can talk about whatever you would like. This PowerPoint will also be posted online tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about copying everything down or missing anything, so that will be on there for you. So our first item under the income is predicting lower growth. And we just was speaking about the 225 projected closings. So that impacts our assessments, obviously, as our number of units coming on to help share in our expenses versus all of the new areas and common areas and expenses that we have coming on. Now, our apartment community income, that is a positive impact. So you will notice in the 2022 comparative, we had budgeted 70,000 and change for apartment revenue. So the people that live in our apartment communities also pay a partial assessment as they don't get everything that you do. They're not able to access the pools or the fitness center, but they can, use our parks and open spaces. So they actually pay, their owner of the buildings pay an assessment as well. Well, with all of the new apartments that are coming online and with the agreements that the developer has put into place with them to pay those assessments for those rights, we're now estimating in the budget for 2023 that 70,000 is going up to 130. So that had a really nice impact on our financials for 2023. And I am talking in round numbers, not exact. So another really positive line item in our revenue is our bad debt reduction. So in order to make sure that we are properly funding our operating money, we have to account for bad debt, for the funds that we will bill that we will not collect. Over the last couple of years, we have budgeted higher than what has actually occurred. So thank you all very much for paying your assessments. You're able to help keep your assessments low by doing so. That also goes into some really solid collection efforts with the team. And so we want to thank everybody for participating in that. That helps keep your assessments lower. Our CenturyLink revenue share line item, and that line item is where the Live Daybreak, in our contract with CenturyLink, we get $4.20, I believe it is, back for every unit that has service. That has been founded in the original documents that goes to the community council or Live Daybreak. The original founders wanted to make sure that when sales slowed or ended, that Live Daybreak had a funding source. So right now, their funding source is community enhancement fees for new home closings as well as resales. So as you can imagine, with only expecting to have 225 new closings, that greatly impacts their Live Daybreak budget. So every year, their board looks at their budget and says, yes, we can forward those funds on to the Master Association to help offset their expenses, or no, we can't. So in 2023, faced with 225 closings, we are both preparing for the worst case scenario. In that way, the association, as you can see in your budget, we will be getting 6 months of the CenturyLink revenue share, and they are budgeting to keep the second half of the year CenturyLink revenue share. Now, the reason that they did that is in June, their board will evaluate where they are financially. And if things are going well and they don't need it, there is a chance that they could then go ahead and give that money to the HOA. But we can't budget on wishful thinking, and we need to budget on what we believe to be the actual case. So that'll be evaluated and we'll see how that goes. So that's what that line item reduction is. And then we have our DCC room rentals. Those went up, and while it's not necessarily a huge item, I just wanted to make sure that our residents noticed and looked that those people who are renting the space, it's actually grown, and those monies go back into the budget to help pay for the expenses and the cost of the facility. So it's really a good thing whenever we can see that revenue is increasing, where we have repeat tenants that want to rent the space, such as the karate and different things like that the kids are really happy with. So those have a great positive impact for us. And that's under the DCC room rentals. Now, in our fitness classes, that revenue is proposed to go up because we will be proposing a $2 per class increase. There hasn't been an increase on fitness classes in at least, I believe, 7 to 10 years. And what we're wanting to do with that, and you will talk about that under the expense side, is be able to increase the fitness instructors' salary so that we can be competitive. Because what we're hearing is we don't have enough classes, and we don't have enough classes because we don't have enough instructors. And so we're wanting to make sure that we can get the instructors and be competitive. So when people sign up for classes, there's actually new class times, and they have the ability to do, to do so, to get in there, because that's one of the pet peeves. And then, of course, what is very important for the financial health of any community association is our reserve contribution. And so we will be funding, the board fortunately has, when the third party did our reserve study, they included an annual update. And so with a community the size of Daybreak, and as we get into 2024, we will be 20 years old. It is imperative that we watch our reserves and that we make sure that we are funding them appropriately. And so our reserve funds are 71% of the 100% recommended. And that is a strong financial position when you're talking about reserves. Our actual reserve fund balance, the money in the bank for the reserves, is at 83.4% funded. So we're doing really, really well. You don't want to overfund, but you definitely don't want to underfund. And then the other line item, and this isn't up in the revenue section, but it sort of impacts it, so we put it up here to remember to talk about it, is prior year surplus. When you look at your Department 1 handout, it's at the end. You'll see prior year surplus. It's actually $715,000. 615 of it is for prior year projects that didn't get completed, and the other 100,000 was put in to help offset, to help make sure our increase was only at $3 and not at $4 or $5. And so those are the highlights on the revenue or income section. And prior to getting into our expenses, I'm sorry, I'm trying to take a drink here and I keep talking. Not only are we growing in the unit count and the number of people joining our community in their new homes, but we are adding common areas and amenities and areas that the association is responsible to maintain and take care of. And so this is a map that shows where we were into 2018. And then this shows where we've grown out into the farther left side into 2022. I just think that it's really important that our residents get a chance to kind of get an overview. Often I run into people that they're kind of like me. When you go home, you stay in the house. Get out, look and see what you have available to you. There are so many open green spaces, not just the lake, but we have the lake, which is a wonderful amenity. We're going to have the water course. It's a great place to live, and make sure that you're enjoying all of the areas that we have for you. Now, this is another year or another growth chart that we wanted to show, but this is based on our unit count. So this is at the beginning of every year. It shows what the unit count started at. And so you can see as it grows, and it has a huge impact. So in 2016, we had 525 closings. And that's what I have in the records. That the other chart is sales. So we didn't get all of the final records at the same time because closings happened afterwards, but it's part of the 2022 sales. So we are averaging quite a huge number of closings over the last several years, and we're trying to catch up. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate staff to make sure that we're covering the right area to take care of our homeowners and what you're here to enjoy. When you look at this chart, one of the things that we want to talk about in a few moments is one of the areas that went up is on-site services, which is staffing. When you look at this chart, it shows year over year, your per unit cost for the on-site non-seasonal staff members. So you can see how it went from 2018 to 2023. So from 2039 to 2730 for the 2023 budget. The largest jump is between 2021 and 2022. So what happened in 2022 this year? Well, inflation. We were hit hard. One of the things that our Budget and Finance Committee brought to us when we started to hire our seasonal lifeguards, as an example, is there weren't any. Everybody was fighting for lifeguards. The county, you may have seen that, they were like offering sign-in bonuses and all of these things. So what the Budget and Finance Committee and the board wanted to do is have a salary review of everybody. And so what we did was we went through and looked at everyone's salaries and pay rates based on what is the current conditions. And what we found, there were quite a number of people that we have working in the areas that were making less than what you could make at McDonald's. And so what we needed to do was go through, and certain positions did get increases based on the inflationary rates, because we want to be able to keep our people. We want to be able to attract good people. And even with the inflationary increases that we did mid-year, we still have positions that we haven't been able to fill. So it's still a real tight market, and we're hoping that we can get through all of that. But we wanted to make sure that we showed this to you, because I know that this is a big area where our residents like to discuss and make sure that everything is reasonable in what it needs to be. The other chart that you have is showing how many of the staff that we have. So in 2018, we had 22, and in 2023, we are recommending that we go up to 29, which is 3 new positions. And so when you think about it, that is very few people for over almost 20-some thousand people that we have here. So we're trying to balance that out. Some of the stats that I have on my notes is in 2018, as an example, we had 1 staff member for every 783 residents. In 2022, we have 1 staff member for 1,044 residents. So that's part of what we're wanting to do, is even that out with those 3 new positions. Oops. Now, in our expense highlights, the areas that we want to talk about, and first and foremost are the top 2 bullets, which is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about how the inflation has impacted the association on staffing level, costs, goods, and everything. So we wanted to make sure again that we discussed those items with you as our residents in depth. Also, you notice that we have reserves. Our reserves are hit because again, that's based on cost of goods. That's what we plan for large repairs and replenishments. So that impacted our update this year. We already discussed our on-site services, and the 3 positions that we are recommending is a design review coordinator. We currently have 2 design review coordinators trying to process over 100 applications a month. And for those of you who have been through the process, they work very, very hard, but it can be quite time consuming. So we're proposing to add another team member to help make that process go a little smoother. We're also doing an in-depth study on the process. So we have a task force or focus group that we're getting ready to start. And some of you will be receiving phone calls to see if you want to join it. And we will be selecting those persons from the annual survey. So we're going to select 4 people from the survey that said they had a negative impact on the design review process. And we're going to select 3 persons from the survey that said they had a positive. And then we're going to go, we're going to go through quite a number of evaluations to see what we can do better to make it easier for everyone, as well as our design review committee. They're really almost working a full-time job on that, so we want to thank them. Our legal fees and attorneys, you'll notice that there's a large jump on that line item. And of course, we have, more policies and contract reviews, but one of the biggest part of that is filing for amendments or filing documents. So currently what is happening is they will charge $2 per impacted unit. So when we had a policy and an amendment we wanted to record, they wanted to charge us $14,000. When we get billed out at $20,000, that would be $40,000. So what we're doing, LHM as well as CAI, we're working, trying to talk to the legislatures to see and have them put a cap on it. So the increase in here, we have 2 pending amendments that need to be recorded. So we have money in here to record them in 2023, assuming that legislation doesn't get passed. So we have to plan again for the worst and hope for the best. So if any of you know any of your legislatures, please vote for yes, we want to have a cap on those. We don't want to have to pay $40,000 to take care of our business and recording amendments. Now the AV system, I brought that up. It's not a big line item, but we pulled that out because one of the complaints that we've had is meetings like this. For those of you who are on the Zoom, it's been bad audio, visual, different things like that. So we put money in the budget to revamp the system. So we also had one of our board members who is pretty techie, Scott, who's sitting in the corner over there, worked with us tonight to try a few things to help us improve the quality. So for those of you on Zoom, if you're hearing better, feel free in the Q&A section there, make a note and let us know if you're hearing okay or not. So we're trying a few things to make sure it's better, because I think one of the positive things that came out of COVID are these hybrid meetings. We're actually getting more people involved in attending from their homes, and it makes it more convenient for them. And so we want to continue doing all of that. So we put that in there to let you know we're working on it and we heard you. And then we have the water course. We're going to get a couple of phases of the water course coming online, and that's under Department 2022 section. And then we also have various other common areas that's under the landscape line item in Department 1. Landscape extras, we merged with landscape supplies. So it looks like there's almost a $200,000 jump in there, and it's the merging of 2 different categories. And so that's identified in your budgets, and please don't feel you have to flip through and you're getting lost. We put notes in there for you to let you know what was replacing what so you can follow along. But we wanted to let you know it's not a huge increase. It's just the merging of 2 line items. And then we have our capital improvement expense. And you'll notice the asterisk there, and it says it's partially offset by prior year surplus. So remember when I was talking under the revenue, I said that there's a section that's prior year surplus. So what happens is as we plan for projects and we budget for projects and they come out of your assessment, if those projects don't occur, that money stays in your account, or it can go into your reserves wherever the board decides that it wants to go. But what we've had over the last couple of years are several projects that didn't get to be completed, but are still on the books to be done. So those are prior year assessments. We wanted to make sure that you don't pay for them twice, so to speak. So you have a prior year surplus line item of $615,000 that also offsets partial amount of this of $615,000 for those prior year projects that we're going to try to get done in 2023. So we needed to put them in as an expense so that as we expend them, our budget shows that they were budgeted for. But by putting in the prior year surplus amount, it did not impact your assessments. It's already been paid for. And so some of those are the bollard lights around Ochre Lake. We've got Millerton project. We have some lights on the bridges and a few other things that is in that $615,000 of prior year projects. Then we have a few new projects for 2023 that's also in that line item, but is not covered by the prior year assessments because we haven't planned on them before. And so a couple of them are much smaller than the prior ones I discussed, but they've been asked for over several years, and we're trying to get those implemented as well. A few electrical repairs that we still need to have happen over on Mountain View Corridor and Lake Avenue where the monument signs aren't lit. So we need to get those things fixed as well. And those are part under the capital improvements and under that section. And it's important to note that when we budget for these, it is our intent to make sure that these things happen. Unfortunately, things do come up, supplies may not be available, or contractors might not be available. And so when we budget them, it is the intent to get them done, and we will do everything to make that happen. But just know there are sometimes unforeseen circumstances that prevent a project from occurring as planned. But that's why we have the prior year surplus, and we retain that money so that we can get it done as soon as possible. The other expense line item that we highlighted is under utilities in Department 1, and that is water. The reason we have that is because for those of you who were getting all of the e-blast we had this summer, you will know that our secondary water source was shut off in the beginning of August. And so that means that we had reduced amount of water that we could get into the common areas and the landscape areas due to the drought that we're going through. We fully expect the drought to continue into next year, and we fully expect a similar thing to occur next year, which will be shutting down our access to our secondary water. Well, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to make sure that we have at least some secondary source of water, not secondary water, but be able to have money in the budget to purchase culinary water from the city so that we can at least water our trees and plants. So we have $105,000 in the budget to make that purchase if we need to, and if they agree to it. And again, that's not going to be enough to water all of the common areas 100%. It's just to sustain our trees and our plants. One of the other projects that we have that I didn't mention is we have $300,000 that we are working on replacing a lot of our trees. For some of you who don't know, we have over 10,000 trees that the association is responsible for. So we basically have a daybreak forest. And over the last several years, we've lost some trees because some of them that had been doing so well over the many years we've been here had various diseases come up, and they are no longer doing well. So we've been researching and coming up with alternate varieties. You don't want to keep planting a tree that we know now is not going to survive. So as we make the replacements of these trees, we're looking for drought tolerant trees and different species that will do better so that we're not having the same problems year over year. You know, trees are a living organism just like human beings, and diseases and different things happen over the years. So that's what we have to stay current on. And we work with an arborist to help us make good choices. And so that's why we really want to make sure when we put that money into replacing our trees that we're missing, that we have the water that we can make sure that we are watering them and to take care of them next year if our secondary water source is cut off. So that was a significant one that we wanted to make sure that, that our homeowners were aware of. And then when we talk about on-site services, that also includes our lifeguards. And so when you look at departments 3 through 7, that is all of the individual pools that we have. And so one of the things that happen is we normally have the lifeguards are in-house staff and with CCMC, and we had our liability insurance go up almost well, a little over 40%. So in order for the in-house lifeguards to stay with CCMC, it was going to be $100,000 more than where we outsourced it to Premier Aquatics. We didn't want to pay CCMC $100,000 more than you have to. And so that's why we went out and found a company that could provide the lifeguards for us. We will still have oversight of them, and we're not expecting our homeowners to notice any difference, but this will be the first summer coming up for that. And so we wanted to make sure that, again, that we found a resource that helps tighten the budget as much as possible while still providing you the services that you're used to receiving. So that's included in there. And those are the biggest changes under the pools, is just the lifeguard services. So the Premier contract is higher than our 2022 budget, but again, that is still significantly less than what it would have been if we kept them in-house with us. So we wanted to make sure we cut that out for you guys to make sure you had the lifeguards without paying more than you needed to pay. I'm flipping back through my notes to make sure that I didn't miss anything that I really wanted to visit about. I'm sure if I forgot something, you all will ask during the Q&A section. And then we also have a lot of people who like to see things in graphs. So basically everything that you're looking at on paper, everything that I talked about, are reflected in how they break out in these various different pie charts that we have for you, not just the cake. And this is for our digital people that like to see things broken down numerically. And one of our Budget and Finance Committee members wanted to make sure that we shared with you, when you look at this, it says that the operating is a very large portion, 69% of that pie. Well, in operating, that covers everything. So we wanted to point out that almost 50% of that 69% of the pie goes into the trails, parks, and green space maintenance that we have. So we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then this is another chart that helps break it down a little bit more by departments. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided various different ways for you to receive this information so that it fits everybody's communication style as much as possible. We have the reserves on here because it is an important component, but it is not included as an expense. It's a contra revenue account, but we wanted to show it in this pie. So if you add up the numbers in your expense section, it won't balance, because if you put in the reserve contribution number, you'll have to take it out. But we put it in the pie to make sure that you could see what that percentage of it was. Oops, you broke it. And then this is a rendering of some of the phases that we hope to receive in 2023 for our water course. We won't get the whole water course, but we will get portions of it. For those of you who have driven over there, you can see that water is coming in. You can see where they have some rocks and they're prepping it for various different landscaping. For those of you who are really concerned about the water, that water was saved back and was planned way in advance for the filling of that, and it didn't impact or take away from anything else with the drought. So we just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was tucked away and saved for that purpose. And so this is a pretty rendering, and we'll get pieces of that next year. I believe starting in August, we expect the turnover to be for those phases that we get. And then that's kind of my story. And again, you're looking at a whole lot of information in front of you, and I only hit on a few of the highlighted areas. So please take a moment, take a look at what you have. If you have questions, please put them in. Both myself, some of my team members, as well as there's some board members in here, as well as our wonderful Budget and Finance Committee, will try to answer your questions. And I'm going to move this over into the center so that if there's anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question, you'll want to come up to this so those folks on Zoom can hear it. And then, like we always do, we'll alternate between Zoom and the audience. And we'll start with Zoom while I move the microphone.
All right. Thank you everyone for attending virtually and in person. Like Cindy said, we're going to be starting the Q&A portion of the meeting. I just wanted to give a quick reminder that We will only be answering specific questions to the Master Association budget during this meeting. We will not be answering any questions specific to sub-associations or benefited service areas. We have noticed in the Q&A that we have received some questions that are not related to the budget. Please start asking us questions. We only have one budget-specific question so far on Zoom. If you have a question, please submit one. And keep in mind that if we don't get to you during this meeting, we will be posting a document online where we summarize all of the questions and answers from this meeting. All right, starting with the first Zoom question. All right, Cindy, I know you touched on this previously, but one of our residents wants you to clarify with the new apartments going in, does each of those units pay a full Master Association assessment fee? And does the developer as well?
No, the apartments pay a prorated assessment fee. Can you hear me okay?
No,
No? Hello? Is that better?
that is.
Okay, thank you. I have to eat it. Okay. I was saving it for the cake. So the apartments pay a reduced amount, a prorated amount, because they don't have all of the access to the amenities that you have. So they only pay a portional fractional amount. The developer doesn't pay assessments. They are here to develop the community, and only when they turn stuff over to the association to maintain, that's when we take care of it. Any of the land that you see that belongs to the developer and all of the development costs are paid for by them. It's nothing that comes out of your assessments. So we don't pay for anything until it's been turned over to us as a common area. Yes, sir.
As a follow-up to that one, what amenities don't the apartment dwellers get to use?
They don't get to use the pool or this facility here, but they can use the parks in Ochre Lake.
Okay. Moving on, how many existing homes do you anticipate selling? The new homes are going to be down to 225. How
Correct.
many existing homes do you anticipate reselling?
That is not something that impacts our budget. So it's not a number that I have. Do we have any real estate agents that might have an idea of what resale numbers might be in the audience? A lot less than normal, she says.
Do we have anyone here from Live Daybreak?
No,
Who oversees Live Daybreak's financials?
the Live Daybreak Board does. They are a separate association than us, and they have their own board of directors, and they oversee theirs. And yes, he would have that
Do
number.
we get
'cause
to
that's
vote
part
on
of
them
his-
as residents?
No,
Who gets to appoint those board members to Live Daybreak?
the developer board. Now, yeah, they don't do elections, correct. But there are homeowner board members on that board.
All right, the next question from Zoom. What is the monthly and annual budget totals for the Master Association? So I can go ahead and answer this one.
Thank you.
So if you go on our website, we posted the full budget. So what you'll do is you'll go under Master Association and then Financials and Insurance. And you can look at the 2023 master budget. It has the whole thing outlined line item by line item. Everyone who's attending in person has the budget packet in front of them, but those who are asking that virtually, if you go online, you can see a full breakdown with all of those details.
And it's roughly around $13 million total. Anybody else? Oh, welcome back.
Welcome back. When does the CenturyLink contract come up for rebid? And why is the community increased so much when our assessment is staying the same?
The telecommunity assessments is based on unit count, and it's $33 a month per unit. And that did not change, but it will go up as the unit count goes up. And it's offset by the CenturyLink expense down below. So those net zero. And they have a zero impact on your base assessment. And the contract, I think just did a 5-year renewal. So I believe we have 4 years in the next 5-year cycle, if I'm not mistaken. One second, is there anyone?
We don't have any
Okay.
more budget specific questions on Zoom. If anyone is attending virtually, please feel to submit your question if you have any, and we'll answer that.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
So I just have some budget strategies to maybe reduce some of our costs.
Okay,
that we've noticed. One of them is rather than buying more water, let's reduce our water use. We all noticed that Daybreak is watering a lot of the lawn when it's raining, when it's windy. We should have rain sensors on the controllers. We should have weather stations controlling that water. Could significantly reduce our water expense by just putting in smart controllers. I don't know if that's being done.
it
Um,
is.
trees died, yeah, by disease, but they also died by poor installation and poor maintenance. A lot of them are just totally flooded and underwater, or they're completely not watered at all. And then I would, can we control when we bring open space online so that we can actually afford that open space and maintain it? I don't know how that recipe works, but I'm sure there's something going on with the master developer and us when we bring open space online, obviously, but we need to be careful also to review those plans, make sure that those new amenities are maintainable and the life cycle costs are manageable. We have a lot of really tricky maintenance parks already that are really hard to maintain. So we should probably do a lot better review on what we're actually getting and what we have to maintain. So we're not spending a lot of money maintaining really expensive play equipment, for example, or boardwalks and things like that. And then just overall, the maintenance company, whoever we're hiring, has, in our opinion, has been very, very poor this year. Very sporadic. Some places look spectacular. Some places are actually just absolutely terrible.
Thank you for those suggestions. Some of them are already being implemented that you spoke about. That's where I mentioned earlier, we're working with an arborist, getting a tree treatment program to make sure that when we replace them, they're getting what they need moving forward. And then, I'm sorry, is that better? Can you hear me now? What was that commercial that used to do that? Can you hear me now? Verizon, I think it was. So those are some good suggestions and things that we already have in place. And yes, as the developer is looking, they look several years out and they look at expected new home sales with what they want to bring online. And so some of those things get scaled back. So as an example, for the water course, we're not getting the whole thing. We're just going to get pieces of it. So that helps us not to have to absorb it all at once. So, but thank you for your suggestions and caring for coming out. Oh, you have one?
Yes, we have another one. This question is specific to landscaping and the budget. The question is, does the association have any plans to implement xeriscaping to reduce long-term landscaping costs on the budget?
We are looking at our future, absolutely. And so that is something that we're very conscious of. We do not have a plan at the moment, but that is something that the developer is looking at, which will impact new common areas as we get them. And then based on those, as we cycle through some of our existing areas, we'll see how we can marry those with some of the new drought tolerant plants and scapes that we have to us. So yes, we are working to look into that.
Following up on that, why did the landscape contract expense drop by $234,000?
Thank you. I had that in my notes and I forgot to mention that. So thank you. Last year in 2022, there was pieces of the water course that was in the 2022 budget, and there were some other common areas that were scheduled to come online that didn't. And so our 2023 budget is reflecting exactly what we have and a few common areas that we do expect to come on additional. And then the water course is its own department. So that was the biggest chunk that was taken out of there, and you'll see it in Department 22's handout.
And why did our professional fees drop? You'd think that we're getting charged more, not less.
The professional fees line item includes for our design review consultant. And then also in there is money for some rewiring at the HOA. So we put in there exactly what our contract is for a design review consultant and an expectation of what that rewiring is. The other consultant that was in there for 2022 is not going to be needed in 2023.
So I just have one quick question. What
And you can make that
this
taller.
thing? Oh, it's in my hand now.
There you go, even better.
So what have we done to evaluate the budget as far as waste and trying, have we done any waste studies And kind of, can you walk us a little bit through that process on those studies and what results you found, if you did any?
Every single line item, we go through and dissect every single line item. I don't know if any of the Budget and Finance Committee want to chat about that, but that's one of their key functions is, like, as I said, I started at the original draft was at $8. And then we've gone through, taken out what we don't need, changed, got bids, got actual numbers versus estimates, projects and various things to tighten it up as close as possible. So we go through every single line item one at a time and dissect them and get it as tight as we can, and make sure what is in there is exactly what we expect it to be. So there's not a lot of fluff in this budget.
So are we, besides looking at it on black and white, right? Because paper tells one story and then actual expenses tell a whole nother story. So is there anything that we've done to analyze maybe how we're assessing people and maybe, for example, like one of the line items I'm looking at is like postage. That expense went up by $40,000. This and all these little things, kind of add up. So I just look at this and I wonder, there's lots of late notices going out, but there's not much revenue coming in, from postage going out. Or if we're sending violation notices, there's not a lot of revenue coming in, but there's a lot of expense going out for probably some unnecessary mail, right? Some things that maybe we need to try and push digitally. So like, I was just curious if we drilled down in that form, saying, I guess a hot topic would be like sending out garbage can violations. Like, what a waste if we're mailing that postage wise, when that could go almost all virtually or even by text. So like, did we strategize looking at things like that?
We do look at things like that. And one of the problems is we're also governed by statute as to certain things have to go by mail still.
Mhm.
Other things can be done digitally. So like we offer an option for your quarterly statements. If you would like to have those digitally, please let us know. And we would love to have that happen. And we would love to send less trash can and violation letters. We need your help and cooperation in order to do so. So please put your trash cans up. And I'm not trying to be flippant, but we do look at all of those things, and there are certain things we do have to send by mail still because of statute. But those statements would be a great savings.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are still getting the paper, please let us know that you want them digitally. That's a hard word for me to say tonight. And that's a big area that would help a lot. Anything else? I'm going to start charging you.
Okay, well.
Let's see, that's a new revenue source, guys.
Look at this. Look at this. So I was looking at the landscape expense. I think he kind of alluded to that a little bit. At one point I had understood that there was a special reserve account for tree replacement or a tag, some sort of line item that you guys had created
In the reserves.
in the reserves for this. Is that where that money's coming from, that $300,000?
Yes, 200,000 is coming out of reserves, 100,000 is coming out of the operating,
Uh-huh.
because what we're wanting to do is catch up on some trees that we're missing. And so we have for the next couple of years, $100,000 each year in the reserves to take care of trees. But we have a $300,000 need. So that's where the 100,000 came into operating. But yes, it's a reserve expenditure typically.
And is there anything that we're doing to push warranting those items with builders or installers to hold them accountable for misinstallations and warranting items? I do notice I do notice looking around and having just had the time to, because I do try to enjoy daybreak, looking at it, that a lot of the trees that have died have recently been planted. I mean, not a lot, but there's a fair portion, I'll say, that had recently been planted. And many of that was just, for example, if you're on South Jordan Parkway, there's two people that are really responsible for that. The installer, not only of the trees, but maybe of even the irrigation system. Simply, there's just not enough water pressure to push the water to those trees. So you run up to these areas where trees die. And so I just want to make sure we're holding people accountable for poor installation and even poor maintenance of our property. So what are we doing about that?
We do keep track of trees planted and warranty. We do have people our contractors come in and replace them under warranty. So as an example, when we turn over a common area, we go through and we have a landscape plan that counts all the trees, plants, et cetera. And so with that, we note the date as to when it was turned over, and then we have a warranty date for those trees. And so if they die anytime during that warranty period, then that contractor is held accountable, and then they replace them at warranty. There's a large number of trees that was removed along Lake Avenue by where the tree farm is. And so LHM donated, there's actually 73 trees there. I don't know if anyone knew that, but there's 71 or 73 trees along there. And so they donated those so we don't have to pay for those replacements. And those we're hoping to get in before the end of the year. The rest of our trees will be replaced in the spring. But yes, we do hold people accountable. Another thing that we're doing, we're working with the developer and all of the contractors that they use and we do, is as new areas are coming online, we're wanting to make sure that all of the trees have their own zones. So if we do have to turn water off on turf or something, we wanted to make sure that our trees, we can still just turn the water on them, and that'll help in future drought areas as well. And for anyone that has questions, and don't think tonight is your only chance to ask them. For those of you who know me, I love talking about the budget. I mean, a lot of work goes into this. And if I can trap anyone in my office who really cares enough to know, please look at them shaking their head. Yes, that's just not very nice. Please set an appointment with me and I will go over every penny with you if you're interested in doing so. So just let me know what your needs are and don't feel tonight is your only chance to ask. Yes, sir. Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see it.
Does the reserve study cover Oakard Lake? Because you've got a
Yes.
lot of money in the reserve fund. I don't know what the total is because it's not reflected there. My concern is when was the study done? When was it going to be updated? Because that's going to be a big expense. And do you have an idea, because you don't have anything in the budget saying for 2023, but down the road, does the reserve study say when things should be done?
yes, to all of that. So the reserve study, we get done a brand new one on-site visit every 3 years.
Okay,
We get non-on-site visits every year so that they update those.
okay,
And the reserve study is online. Also, every month, our financials are posted online, which has the balances on the reserves and operating and all of that as well. And that's another thing that our Budget and Finance Committee, they are forced to sit with me on a monthly basis and go through those
Cindy, on the
items.
subject of Oka Lake, I believe, doesn't that have its own reserve?
It does have its reserve, yes. Uh-oh. See, we really should charge him.
Charge me. You are charging me.
Oh, isn't he funny?
So-
He's here all week, folks.
So,
Thank you for having-
I kind of lost my train of thought with that comment.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
So one of our largest expenses, and it's mentioned on almost every single one of these statements here, is obviously landscape and repair. You know, a lot of times when I look at that sort of line item in dealing with landscape and repair, sometimes it's a signal when it's larger than maybe we anticipate it to be. Sometimes I look at that as a signal that we're understaffed in that area to actually hold people accountable in that realm. Have we looked at hiring an additional person to reduce cost in the landscape maintenance area? Because greater accountability with subcontractors results in reduced costs, even though we spend a little bit of money to bring an employee online.
He just became my favorite person. Yes, one of the 3 new positions is someone to work with our operations manager. We're calling him an operations field tech so that we have more than one person going around chasing after all of the contractors, especially during the summer, to make sure that they are doing what they need to do, making the irrigation repairs as quickly as possible and following up. One of the things that I will say about this year, it was an extremely difficult landscape season. It was probably one of the hardest that I've experienced since being here. I was here for 6 years before I left, and now I've been here for a year. And this past summer was one of the most difficult landscaping seasons that we had. A lot of it had to do with our contractors not being able to get people. And then also we needed to be able to follow up better. And so, yes, we are adding a staff member to help us do that. And we're hoping that they have made plans and doing everything they can to get the staff that they need. But again, I don't think that there's been any industry that wasn't hit with having trouble hiring and keeping people this year. That's not an excuse. It's just part of the problem that we faced last year, this past summer. Yes.
Just to put Chris on the spot for a minute, rough numbers, how many acres do we have that we maintain landscaping on?
Approximately 500.
We have approximately 500 acres of landscaped area that we have to maintain. That's a lot. Also, Chris, since you're on the spot, one of the questions was about saving water. Do you remember off the top of your head how much water we saved this past summer from our allocated secondary use?
156 million gallons.
That was last year or this year?
This year.
We saved a lot last year too,
Yeah, last year was 30 million.
but we still got cut off with.
And we still got cut
156
off.
million.
So it's important for the residents to understand about the secondary water that we get charged that whether we use it or not. And state law has a process in place where if we don't use all of it, they can potentially take it back. So this faces all secondary water users in the state of Utah. It's a use it or lose it deal. So they could institute a finding and say you will lose your water shares. The other thing is that the water shares represent an asset for the community. They are viewed as real estate. They are an actual asset that we have to maintain and sustain. So we're kind of caught in a bind statutorily about using them and at the same time conserving as much water as possible because it again is an asset we have to maintain and could potentially lose if we don't.
So, Chris, I'm confused that. So why save it if we might lose it?
Well, that's something we're working on with the state. There is a process they have to go through. We do try to save as much water as possible because it does benefit the state as a whole by allowing the water to pass through from secondary water. And also because we could potentially use it. If we continually draw the water out through the canal system, more gets funneled through, and then that draws down the level of Utah Lake.
All right. Do you have another one?
Just my
And what
final
is your name?
Cameron.
Hi, Cameron. I'm Cindy.
Nice to meet you. So just my limited knowledge on pool staffing, and it's always been a curiosity of mine. I don't think we sell enough guest passes to make it worthwhile of an adventure to say, hey, we're gonna, staff this as a commercial pool. It doesn't justify the expense of having it so heavily staffed with lifeguards. I understand safety, been EMT, done all that shindig. Wanted to be a lifeguard one day and decided didn't want to do that when I was younger. But with that being said, you look at that and you say, in my understanding is if you're selling it as if you're selling passes for people to enjoy the amenity, you have to staff it obviously with lifeguards. Can you enlighten us a little bit on that process? Because in a lot of places you have private pools for the HOA and they're not staffed with lifeguards. And I heard the capacity thing too. So enlighten me on why we have to staff it so heavenly. Hopefully no one's going to heaven, but
A little
heavily.
foreshadowing there. Yeah, sure.
Why we have to staff it like that. And is there any way to kind of maybe manipulate that a little differently so that we're not, I've had experience, I use the pools a lot, where we're not having 6 lifeguards sitting on a pool deck at
Well,
the same time.
I'm giggling because that is a question that comes up every single year. And we're working on hopefully next year to create some sort of a diagram to help put out at the pools to help explain what the staff is doing and why they're there. So the lifeguards are not here because we have guest passes. The association is not selling guest passes for revenue. The guest passes are for residents who want to bring non-residents in. There are some who would like for us to say you can't have any guests. I don't want to be here when that happens. So it's not a revenue source and it's not the reason that we have lifeguards. The reason we have lifeguards is to keep anyone, our homeowners and their guests safe from using them. And I am not a lifeguard person, but I can tell you that there is a reason and there's a rotation that we have to follow. So you have so many lifeguards on duty. They're placed at certain different places. Different pools have different areas of coverage that they have to be. They're on a certain amount of time and then they have to rest a certain amount of time. So when you see someone sitting around, I would like for them to go in the lifeguard shack so that they don't look like they're just sitting there, but they're on breaks. The other thing that we're going to be working on next year is to make sure when someone gets off, because a lot of our lifeguards are residents, they like to stay after and play in the pool, but they leave their lifeguard uniform on. So that creates a lot of questions, and they're very good questions and legitimate questions. So we're going to be working on that, especially with our new Premier Pool Company, to help their lifeguards understand that when you're off duty, if you're a resident, because a lot of them will be the same ones coming back, we want you to put your swimming suit on and not wear your lifeguard uniform, and don't visit your buddy while you're off and they're sitting there on their break. It just doesn't look right, and it makes it look like a waste. So I appreciate you asking, and the lifeguards is truly there to keep our residents safe, and the guests are guests of our residents, not a revenue source. All right. If that's it, do you have anything? Nope. Okay.